The bomb didn't beep like in the movies. It pulsed, slow, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing through the steel bones of Redstone Base's command center. The hum in the air was electric, charged and unforgiving. Screens flickered, officers stood frozen, and above it all, the red digits of the countdown glowed like eyes watching them fail. 58 hours, 29 minutes, and 57 seconds. "This has to be a drill," someone whispered. It wasn't. Lieutenant Colonel Scarlet Ray didn't blink. She stood at the head of the control room, her eyes locked on the schematics scrolling across the main display. Her black combat uniform bore no rank insignia. She didn't need one. Everyone already knew who she was, the youngest EOD commander in base history, the best technical strategist in the Western Division, and the woman who had once disarmed an IED underwater with nothing but a wrench and a diver's knife. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But this was different. "This device wasn't part of the simulation," said Major Delaney, sweat pooling at his temples. "It's a real payload. Nuclear capable. It just went live." Scarlet's jaw flexed. "How?" "We don't know." "What do we know?" Delaney swallowed. "The signal to shut it down isn't responding. It's rejecting our command codes, all of them. We tried to isolate it, cut power from the mainframe. It has an internal backup." She stepped forward, her voice sharp and cold as steel. "So you're telling me there's a live warhead in my base, and not a single person here can stop it?" Silence. 52 hours, 29 minutes, and 14 seconds. Scarlet glanced around the room. 37 personnel, 10 different branches. Over 100 years of combined experience in high-risk ordnance. And not one of them had a solution. She exhaled slowly through her nose, then muttered under her breath, "Amateurs." "Ma'am," a junior tech called nervously, there's something else. The device is broadcasting audio frequencies. Sublayered, irregular, possibly a dynamic cipher. We think it's musical." Scarlet turned. "You're telling me someone encoded this thing in music?" "More like sound architecture, ma'am. 5-layered harmonics. We tried filtering it through spectral analyzers, but nothing translates. Honestly, it's gibberish." The room filled with the soft whir of processors running diagnostics, the click of keyboards, the frustrated sighs of specialists hitting dead ends. Every screen showed the same result: access denied, encryption unrecognized, signal interference. 48 hours, 12 minutes, and 33 seconds. "Ma'am, we should consider evacuation protocols," Delaney suggested, his voice cracking slightly. "If we can't disarm it." "We don't run from bombs in my facility," Scarlet cut him off. "We solve them." But even as she said it, doubt crept into her voice. She'd seen devices like this in classified briefings, theoretical weapons that existed in the gray areas between conventional explosives and cyber warfare. Bombs that thought. Bombs that adapted. Bombs that sang. The countdown pulsed again, and with it, that strange harmonic undertone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't random, static, or electronic feedback. There was a pattern to it, a deliberate construction that felt almost conversational. "Run the frequency analysis again," she ordered. "Strip it down to component waves. Someone designed this thing to communicate, and I want to know what it's saying." The tech's fingers flew over the keyboard. Waveforms cascaded across his monitor, peaks and valleys of sound that looked more like music notation than weapons diagnostics. "It's definitely structured, ma'am, but the pattern keeps shifting. Every few seconds it modulates to a different key signature." "It's learning," another officer observed grimly, "adapting to our attempts to decode it." Scarlet felt the weight of 37 pairs of eyes on her. These were good people, trained, dedicated, smart. They'd followed her through 3 combat deployments and never once doubted her judgment. But right now, staring at the impossible device humming its deadly song, she could see the same thing in all their faces that she felt in her chest. Fear. Not just of dying. Any of them would take a bullet for the mission. This was worse. This was the fear of failing. Of being outsmarted by an enemy they couldn't even identify, let alone understand. The device pulsed again, and for just a moment, Scarlet could swear she heard something familiar in the harmonic progression. A melody that tugged at the edge of her memory, like a half-remembered lullaby or a song heard through thin walls. 44 hours, 18 minutes, and 9 seconds. "Keep working," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "There's an answer here. There always is." But privately, watching the countdown tick toward catastrophe while her best people fumbled with frequencies they couldn't decode, Scarlet Ray wondered if this might be the first time she was wrong. A laugh broke the tension. It came from behind them, soft, low, and definitely not authorized. Everyone turned. At the far end of the room stood a man in a navy blue janitor's uniform, leaning on a mop handle like it was a staff of command. He looked completely out of place among the storm of uniforms and blinking lights, but there was something in his posture, relaxed, almost amused, that commanded attention. His name tag read, E. Mercer. Scarlet narrowed her eyes. "Do you think something's funny?" The man shook his head, still smiling faintly. "No, ma'am. Just ironic." She took a step toward him. "Explain yourself." He gestured toward the monitors. "You're trying to decipher a dynamic acoustic lock using AI processors and tactical filters." His smile widened slightly. "It won't work. The algorithm is built to mislead machines." Scarlet folded her arms. "And you know this because—" Eli Mercer met her gaze without flinching. "Because I wrote something like it once. Back when people still called me Dr. Mercer." The room stilled. Even the countdown seemed quieter. Delaney blinked. "Doctor of what?" "Acoustic engineering. Specialized in harmonic encryption. Used to work for DoD Section 44 before I traded it in for this." He gave the mop a gentle tap. "Better hours, less fallout, figurative and literal." Scarlet stared at him like he was a mirage. Around the room, officers exchanged glances that ranged from skeptical to stunned. A janitor. A janitor claiming expertise in advanced weapons technology. "You're telling me you can understand what that thing is saying?" she asked. "I'm telling you it's not saying anything," Eli replied calmly. "It's singing. And if you want to shut it down, you don't need a code, you need an ear." Another officer snorted. "What do you propose? That we hand the warhead over to the janitor?" Eli tilted his head thoughtfully. "Well, if no one else here speaks its language." The absurdity of it hit the room like a physical force. Here was a man who cleaned their floors and emptied their trash cans, claiming he could solve what 3 dozen specialists couldn't. It should have been laughable. Would have been, if not for the countdown ticking steadily toward zero. 39 hours, 47 minutes, and 22 seconds. Scarlet studied Eli's face, really looked at him for the first time. Behind the janitor's uniform and the self-deprecating humor, she saw something that made her pause. Calm. Not the fake bravado of someone trying to impress, but the genuine, quiet confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was looking at. "All right," she said slowly. "Let's say I believe you. Let's say you really do have some background in acoustic whatever. What makes you think you can crack this when my entire team can't?" Eli's expression grew more serious. "Because your team is trying to break the code. I'm just going to ask it politely to open." Delaney stepped forward. "Ma'am, with respect, this is insane. We can't just—" "Can't just what?" Scarlet cut him off. "Trust a janitor? Because our other options are working so well?" The bitter truth hung in the air. 37 of the military's best, and they were no closer to a solution than when they'd started. Meanwhile, the man with the mop was looking at the bomb like it was an old friend having a bad day. 35 hours, 12 minutes, and 14 seconds. "If you really think you can shut it down," Scarlet said, her voice taking on an edge that was part challenge, part desperation, "then disarm that bomb by ear, and if you succeed—" She paused, a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "I'll marry you out of pure spite." The room gasped. Nervous laughter rippled through the officers, half stunned, half appreciative of their commander's dark humor in the face of disaster. Eli just smiled. "Well, that's higher stakes than hazard pay." She waved him forward. "Go on then, Maestro. The floor is yours." As Eli set aside his mop and walked toward the device, something shifted in the room's atmosphere. The skepticism remained, but it was joined now by something else. A desperate kind of hope. Because sometimes, when all the conventional wisdom fails, when all the training and technology and expertise comes up empty, the only thing left is to trust in the impossible. 31 hours 58 minutes and 47 seconds. The bomb continued its strange song, and for the first time since the countdown began, someone was listening. The moment Eli stepped toward the bomb, the entire command center seemed to inhale and hold its breath. Not a soul moved. No one dared. Even the countdown fell quieter. 26 hours, 42 minutes, and 18 seconds. He moved with a calm that didn't match the chaos, like a man walking into a room he'd cleaned 100 times before. In truth, he had. Redstone's control center was on his route every third night. He knew the feel of the floors, the hum of the walls, but he'd never expected to stand here like this, at the center, not the fringe. Scarlet trailed him with her eyes, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He stopped 3 feet from the device. It sat like an uninvited god in the middle of the diagnostics table. Matte black casing, no serial numbers, no instructions, just a blinking red light and that faint pulsing sound that seemed to come from the bones of the air itself. Eli tilted his head slightly and closed his eyes. There it was, a 5-tone cycle, each note layered in dissonance, designed to mask itself in any environment. To most people, it would sound like feedback, white noise, maybe a computer glitch. But to him, it was a language, one he hadn't spoken in years. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded notepad and a short pencil, the kind he used to track supply inventory. He wrote quickly, 5 frequencies, 3 harmonic anchors, 2 decoy pulses. His jaw clenched. "It's worse than I thought." Scarlet's voice snapped from behind. "Start talking." Eli turned slightly. "This isn't just a fail-safe encryption, it's reactive. Whoever built this didn't want it disarmed. They wanted it to punish anyone who tried." "So it's booby-trapped?" "Harmonically speaking, yes. Every time your computers tried to break the code, it learned from the attempt. It's not just locked, it's actively defending itself." Delaney stepped forward, sweat beading on his forehead. "But you can crack it?" Eli looked back at the device, his expression growing distant. "Maybe, but not the way you've been trying." He knelt beside the bomb, close enough that the others instinctively took a step back. The humming grew slightly louder, as if responding to his proximity. "What are you doing?" Scarlet demanded. "Listening." He cocked his head like a dog hearing a far-off whistle. "It's not random. There's a signature here. A personality." Without warning, Eli began to hum, low, soft, barely audible. The sound seemed to hang in the air for a moment, then the bomb's pulse changed. Just slightly, a half-beat slower, the tone marginally warmer, but everyone in the room heard it. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Eli's humming grew more confident, following the device's rhythm, but adding his own harmonies. Like a conversation between old friends who spoke in music instead of words. 22 hours, 15 minutes, and 33 seconds. The countdown slowed, not stopped, but visibly decelerated, as if the bomb was suddenly less certain about its purpose. "How the hell?" Delaney started. Eli held up a hand for silence, never breaking his strange musical dialogue with the device. His humming shifted, became more complex. The bomb responded, its own tones growing richer, less aggressive. Scarlet watched, transfixed. This wasn't science. This wasn't technology. This was something else entirely. Something that existed in the space between art and engineering, between human intuition and mechanical logic. "The signature," Eli murmured, still humming softly. "I know this signature." He stood slowly, his face pale. "This isn't just based on my old work. This is my old work. Someone took a framework I designed and twisted it." "Twisted it how?" Scarlet's voice was sharp with sudden alarm. Eli met her eyes, and she saw something there that made her stomach clench. Not just recognition, but pain. "This harmonic structure," he said quietly. "I designed it with my wife. It was supposed to be a communication protocol, not a weapon. We called it the Maya scale." The room fell silent, except for the bomb's continued singing, now noticeably softer, almost melancholy. 18 hours, 47 minutes, and 9 seconds. "Your wife?" Scarlet asked. "Dr. Maya Chavez Mercer. She died 3 years ago, on a mission that—" He trailed off, then shook his head. "Someone took our work and turned it into this." The implications hit the room like a cold wave. This wasn't random terrorism. This was personal. Someone had weaponized a dead woman's research and aimed it at her widowed husband. "Can you still stop it?" Delaney asked urgently. Eli looked back at the bomb, which continued its strange song, no longer aggressive but not yet silent. "I think so, but I need to understand why someone would do this. What they want me to hear." He knelt again, placing his ear close to the device. The humming grew louder, more complex, like a choir of electronic voices all singing in harmony. "There," he whispered. "There's another layer, hidden underneath." His eyes widened. It's not just Maya's scale. Someone encoded something else inside it. A message. Scarlet leaned forward. What kind of message? Eli's face went ashen. Maya's voice. Someone recorded her voice and wove it into the harmonic structure. The countdown continued its slow tick toward 0, but now everyone in the room understood. This wasn't just a bomb. It was a ghost wrapped in explosives, singing a dead woman's song to the man who loved her. And somehow, impossibly, he was singing back. 14 hours, 23 minutes and 51 seconds. 12 hours, 18 minutes and 44 seconds. The sound of Maya's voice, woven into frequencies and buried beneath layers of electronic noise, hit Eli like a physical blow. He stumbled backward from the device, his face drained of color. "Maya," he whispered, and the bomb responded. The harmonic pulse shifted, gentler now, almost welcoming, like it recognized the name. Scarlet watched Eli's reaction with growing alarm. This wasn't the calm confidence he'd shown moments before. This was a man seeing ghosts. "Dr. Mercer," she said sharply, using his formal title to snap him back to focus. "I need you to stay with me. What exactly are you hearing?" Eli's hands trembled as he ran them through his hair. It's her voice, fragmented, encoded into the frequency modulation, but it's definitely her. Someone took recordings of Maya and... He swallowed hard. They made her part of the weapon. The countdown continued its relentless march toward 0, but the bomb's song had changed. Where before it had been aggressive, defensive, now it carried an almost mournful quality, like a lament. "This is sick," Delaney muttered. "Who would do something like this?" "Someone who knew us both," Eli said, his voice hollow. "Someone with access to classified DoD archives." Maya's voice prints were secured at level 7 clearance. Scarlet felt a chill run down her spine. "You're talking about an inside job." "I'm talking about someone who wanted to make sure I'd be the only one who could understand this thing. They didn't just build a bomb, they built a trap. For me." The implication settled over the room like a lead blanket. This wasn't random terrorism or even targeted assassination. This was psychological warfare at its most personal level. 10 hours, 47 minutes, and 22 seconds. "Can you still disarm it?" Scarlet asked. Eli stared at the device, which continued its strange serenade. "I don't know. Whoever did this, they know how I think. They know I'd try to save everyone, even if it meant facing Maya's voice again." He moved closer to the bomb, his expression a mixture of grief and determination. "The frequency pattern. It's not just based on our work. It's using Maya's actual vocal harmonics as the encryption key. Her laugh, her humming when she worked late, the way she'd sing in the shower." His voice cracked. They recorded everything. Scarlet found herself studying Eli's face, really seeing him for the first time. Behind the janitor's uniform and the modest demeanor, she glimpsed something she recognized. The hollow look of someone who'd lost everything that mattered and spent years learning how to breathe around the absence. She knew that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror after her father's funeral. "Tell me about the original framework," she said, her voice gentler now. "The Maya scale. How was it supposed to work?" Eli's eyes focused slightly. It was beautiful, pure. Maya believed that communication shouldn't just transfer information. It should transfer emotion, context, the space between words. She wanted to create a language that could carry the full spectrum of human feeling. He gestured toward the bomb. "This is that language, perverted. Turned into something that speaks only of death and destruction. 8 hours, 55 minutes, and 17 seconds. "But it's still responding to you," Scarlet observed. "When you hummed, when you said her name, the countdown slowed." Because part of it is still her, Eli said quietly. Whoever built this didn't just steal our work, they trapped pieces of Maya inside it. Her voice, her patterns, her... He closed his eyes. Her love. The room fell silent except for the bomb's continued song. It was impossible to ignore the irony, a weapon that sang of love while counting down to annihilation. There's something else, Eli said suddenly. He pulled out his notepad again, scribbling rapidly. The vocal patterns aren't random. They're following a progression I recognize. Maya used to hum this sequence when she was working through a particularly difficult problem. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He looked up at Scarlet. She's trying to tell me something. What kind of something? I think she's trying to show me the way out. The real Maya, I mean. Before she died, she always said that any system could be unlocked if you knew the right frequency, the right emotional resonance. He knelt by the device again, placing his hand near but not touching the casing. The question is whether I can separate her voice from whatever else has been layered on top of it. 6 hours, 42 minutes, and 38 seconds. How do we know this isn't exactly what the bomber wants? Delaney interjected nervously. What if following the voice makes it worse? Eli met his eyes steadily. Because Maya would never hurt anyone, not even as an echo in a machine. If there's any part of her still in there, she's trying to help. Scarlet made a decision that went against every protocol she'd ever learned. Do it. Ma'am? Delaney's voice pitched higher. You heard him. He's the only one who understands this thing. And right now, a dead woman's voice is our best hope of staying alive. She looked directly at Eli. But if you're wrong, if this goes sideways, I want you to know that I believe you tried. Something passed between them in that moment. Not romance, not attraction, but recognition. Two people who'd learned to carry impossible weight and somehow found the strength to keep moving forward. Eli nodded. If this doesn't work, make sure my son knows I was trying to come home. He turned back to the bomb, closed his eyes, and began to hum Maya's favorite lullaby. The device sang back, and for just a moment, the countdown paused completely. Then it resumed, but somehow the red numbers seemed less menacing, as if even time itself was willing to listen to the conversation between the living and the dead. 4 hours, 29 minutes, and 15 seconds. 3 hours, 47 minutes, and 22 seconds. I need access to DoD personnel files, Eli said without looking up from the device. Specifically, everyone who had clearance for Project Harp Seal. Scarlet frowned. What's Project Harp Seal? The classified program Maya and I worked on, acoustic warfare applications. He finally met her eyes. If someone stole our framework and turned it into this, they had to have inside access. Deep inside. Delaney shifted nervously. Sir, those files require level 9 clearance. Even I don't. I have level 9, Scarlet said quietly. Emergency command protocols. She moved to a secure terminal, her fingers dancing across biometric scanners. But the moment I access those files, every intelligence agency in Washington will know about it. Are you sure this is necessary? Eli's expression was grim. Someone used my wife's voice to build a bomb and planted it in a facility where they knew I worked. This isn't about random terrorism. It's about me. And until we know who and why, we can't be sure there aren't more devices out there. The files came up on Scarlet's screen. She scanned the personnel list, her face growing increasingly troubled. Jesus. Harp Seal had access to some of the most sensitive acoustic research in DoD history. Voice pattern analysis, subliminal frequency manipulation, harmonic encryption. All based on Maya's theoretical work, Eli confirmed. She believed sound could be a universal language. That the right frequencies could transcend barriers of culture, species, even consciousness. 2 hours, 58 minutes, and 44 seconds. And someone turned that into a weapon, Scarlet said, scrolling through the files. The project was shut down 3 years ago after, she paused, her voice softening. After Dr. Chavez Mercer's death in the field. Eli's hand stilled on his notepad. She wasn't supposed to be in the field. Maya was pure research. No combat training, no tactical experience. But someone decided her expertise was needed for a routine equipment test in Afghanistan. What happened? IED took out the entire transport. His voice was flat, emotionless. Except it wasn't random. The device was specifically tuned to disrupt our equipment. Someone knew exactly what frequencies to use. Scarlet felt pieces clicking into place. You think the same person who killed your wife built this bomb? I think someone has been playing a very long game, Eli said, and we're about to find out what the endgame looks like. He returned his attention to the device, which had grown noticeably quieter. The countdown continued, but the aggressive harmonics had faded, replaced by something that sounded almost like conversation. 2 hours, 23 minutes, and 17 seconds. There, Eli whispered. Do you hear that? Scarlet leaned closer. Beneath the electronic pulses in Maya's woven voice, she could make out another sound. Fainter, but distinctly different. It sounds like breathing? What would Maya do? Scarlet asked suddenly. Eli looked at her in surprise. What? You said she was brilliant, that she understood acoustic systems better than anyone. If she were here looking at this same problem, what would she do? Eli closed his eyes, trying to channel his wife's approach to impossible problems. Maya had always said that the most elegant solutions came from understanding the emotional logic of a system, not just its technical specifications. She'd listen, he said finally. Really listen, not just to what the device is saying, but to what it's trying not to say. He leaned closer to the bomb, shutting out the chaos of the room, the countdown, even Scarlet's presence beside him. Just him and the machine, and Maya's voice calling to him from inside its electronic heart. The harmonic pattern shifted as he listened, not random variations, but deliberate modulations, like someone trying to communicate in a language they barely remembered. 0 hours, 24 minutes, and 52 seconds. The yellow wire, he said suddenly. Are you sure? No, he met Scarlet's eyes. But Maya always said that uncertainty was just another word for faith. And right now, faith is all we have. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tuning fork, the same one he'd carried through 3 combat deployments and 7 years of civilian life. A gift from Maya on their first anniversary. What's that for? Delaney asked nervously. Confirmation. Eli struck the fork against the metal table, filling the air with a pure A440 tone. The bomb's harmonics shifted in response, and for just a moment, the complex frequencies aligned into something that sounded almost like a chord. Scarlet breathed. It's singing a chord. Maya's favorite chord, Eli confirmed. A major 7th, she said it was the sound of hope. 0 hours, 19 minutes, and 33 seconds. He positioned himself over the yellow wire, a simple pair of wire cutters in his hand. Around him, the command center held its collective breath. 37 people, all their hopes riding on the judgment of a janitor and the ghost of his dead wife. If I'm wrong, he started. You're not wrong, Scarlet said firmly. I don't know how I know, but you're not wrong. Eli looked at her one more time, memorizing her face in case these were his last few seconds of life. She was beautiful, he realized. Not in an obvious way, but in the way that strength and intelligence and stubborn courage combined to create something that transcended mere appearance. Tell my son I tried to come home, he said quietly. Tell him yourself. 0 hours, 15 minutes, and 18 seconds. Eli closed his eyes, whispered Maya's name like a prayer, and cut the yellow wire. The bomb song stopped instantly. Complete silence filled the room. Not peaceful, but pregnant with possibility. The countdown display flickered once, twice, then 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. But instead of detonation, the numbers simply froze. The red light faded to amber, then to green. And in the sudden quiet, they could all hear the sound of 37 people remembering how to breathe. For a moment, nobody moved. The silence stretched on, beautiful and terrifying, until someone in the back of the room started laughing. Then someone else. Then everyone. A wave of relief and disbelief and pure human joy at being alive when they should have been vapor. Eli slumped against the diagnostics table, the wire cutters falling from nerveless fingers. Maya, he whispered. And this time her name sounded like gratitude instead of grief. Scarlet was beside him in an instant, her hand on his shoulder. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, he corrected. "You believed when you had every reason not to." The room erupted in congratulations and backslapping and the kind of celebration that only happens when people realize they're going to see another sunset. But beneath the joy, Eli felt something else, a nagging certainty that this was far from over. The bomb was disarmed, but whoever had built it was still out there. Someone with access to classified systems and a personal vendetta that ran deeper than simple terrorism. As if reading his thoughts, Scarlet's radio crackled to life. "Colonel Ray, we have a situation. Agent Brain from DoD Special Investigations is en route. ETA 15 minutes. Scarlet and Eli exchanged glances. In the aftermath of the crisis, they'd forgotten about the broader implications. Someone would have to answer questions about how a classified weapon had ended up in their facility. Someone would have to explain how a janitor had succeeded where elite specialists had failed. And Eli had a sinking feeling that those questions were going to lead to answers neither of them was prepared to give. But for now, in this moment, with Maya's voice finally silent and the bomb's threat neutralized, he allowed himself to simply be grateful. Grateful to be alive. Grateful for Scarlet's faith in him. Grateful that somewhere, in whatever place the dead go to watch over the living, Maya was probably smiling. The countdown was over. But as Eli would soon learn, the real test was just beginning. Agent Brain arrived like a storm front, all sharp angles and predatory confidence, flanked by 2 junior investigators who looked like they'd been carved from the same block of government-issued ice. He surveyed the command center with the calculating gaze of a man who saw everything as potential evidence. "Colonel Ray," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from knowing exactly which politicians were on speed dial. "I'm Agent Brain, DoD Special Investigations. We need to talk." Scarlet stepped forward, her posture automatically shifting to command mode. "Agent Brain, I wasn't expecting DoD involvement so quickly. Nuclear incidents tend to accelerate timelines," Brain replied dryly. His eyes found Eli, who was still slumped against the diagnostics table, and something predatory flickered across his features. "Is this the civilian who allegedly disarmed the device?" "This is Dr. Elias Mercer," Scarlet said, deliberately using his formal title. "Former DoD consultant with specialized expertise in acoustic systems." Former being the operative term, Brain approached Eli like a shark circling wounded prey. "Dr. Mercer, or do you prefer Janitor now?" Eli straightened slowly, meeting Brain's gaze without flinching. "I prefer whatever gets the job done." "Interesting philosophy, especially considering that your signature acoustic patterns are embedded throughout this device." Brain gestured toward the now silent bomb. "Curious coincidence, wouldn't you say?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Officers who had been celebrating moments before now watched the exchange with growing unease. "Are you suggesting Dr. Mercer was involved in building this thing?" Scarlet's voice carried a dangerous edge. "I'm suggesting that the man who just happened to be perfectly positioned to solve this crisis also happens to be the co-creator of the underlying technology." Brain pulled out a tablet, swiping through what looked like classified documents. "Project Harpseal. Acoustic encryption protocols. Co-developed by Dr. Elias Mercer and the late Dr. Maya Chavez Mercer." Eli felt the familiar weight of institutional suspicion settling over him like a lead blanket. 3 years ago, after Maya's death, he'd walked away from everything, not just his career, but his identity as someone who mattered. Now that past was being weaponized against him. "The technology was classified," he said carefully, "locked in DoD vaults. If someone stole it and turned it into a weapon, that's not on me. Isn't it?" Brain's smile was razor-thin. "You had intimate knowledge of the systems. You had grievances against the department after your wife's death. And you were perfectly positioned here, in this facility, to both plant and, subsequently, disarm the device." "That's insane," Scarlet interjected. "Dr. Mercer just saved 37 lives. Did he? Or did he simply complete a very elaborate performance designed to position himself as a hero while covering up his own involvement?" The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Eli could see doubt creeping into the faces around him, not the specialists who had watched him work, but the peripheral personnel who knew him only as the quiet man who emptied their trash. "You want to know what's insane?" Eli said, his voice gaining strength. Someone stealing classified research, murdering the woman who created it, and then using her voice to build a psychological weapon. That's what's insane. Brain's eyes sharpened. Interesting that you'd frame Dr. Chavez Mercer's death as murder. The official report classified it as an equipment failure during routine field testing. The official report was wrong. Eli stepped away from the table, his janitor's uniform suddenly feeling like armor instead of camouflage. Maya wasn't supposed to be in the field. Someone specifically requested her presence for that mission, someone who knew exactly what frequencies would disrupt our equipment. And you think that someone was... I think that someone had access to classified files, high-level security clearance, and a very good reason to want both Maya and me out of the picture. Brain's tablet chimed softly. He glanced at it, and for just a moment his confident expression flickered. "What is it?" Scarlet demanded. Nothing relevant to the current investigation, but Brain's voice lacked its earlier certainty. Eli moved closer, his instincts suddenly sharp. "Show me." "I'm afraid that's classified above your current clearance level, Mr. Mercer." "Dr. Mercer," Scarlet corrected icily. "And if it relates to this incident, I have emergency authority to review any relevant materials." Brain hesitated, the first crack in his professional facade. "It's merely a routine system alert." But Eli had caught a glimpse of the tablet's screen before Brain could turn it away. Audio analysis in progress. Harmonic signature match. 97.3%. Source: Project Harp Seal Archive. File designation: Maya_personal_07. "You son of a bitch," Eli whispered. "Dr. Mercer." Scarlet's voice was sharp with concern. Eli's hands were shaking, but not with fear, with rage. "The audio files. Maya's personal recordings. You've been analyzing them." Brain's mask slipped entirely. "Dr. Mercer, I strongly advise you to..." "To what?" "To shut up and let you frame me for using my dead wife's voice to build a bomb?" Eli's voice rose, carrying clearly across the command center. "How long have you been sitting on those files? How long have you been planning this? You're obviously distraught. The stress of the situation." "The only stress here is watching a bureaucrat try to cover up his own crimes." Eli turned to address the room. "Agent Brain has access to Maya's personal audio files. Files that should have been destroyed after the project was terminated. Files that could only have been preserved by someone with administrative authority over Harp Seal." Scarlet stepped between Eli and Brain, her hand resting casually on her sidearm. "Agent Brain, I think it's time you explained exactly what your role in Project Harp Seal was." "I was oversight," Brain said quickly. "Standard departmental review." "Oversight of what, specifically?" Brain's silence stretched too long. Around the room, officers began to shift positions. Not obviously, but enough to create what looked suspiciously like a defensive perimeter around their colonel. "Agent Brain," Scarlet said quietly, "I'm going to need to see your identification again, and your authorization for this investigation." For the first time since entering the room, Brain looked genuinely rattled. "Colonel, I don't think you understand the delicate nature." "I understand perfectly," Scarlet's voice cut like steel. "The question is whether you do." In the tense silence that followed, Eli made a decision that would either save his life or end it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, scrolling to one of Maya's old audio files. "You want to hear something interesting, Agent Brain? This is Maya, recorded 3 days before she died. She was working late debugging the Harp Seal encryption protocols." He pressed play. Maya's voice filled the room, warm, intelligent, alive. "Can't believe someone would try to weaponize this framework. The whole point was communication, not destruction. I've locked down the core algorithms, but if someone really wanted to reverse engineer them..." "Eli, if something happens to me, make sure no one ever gets their hands on the full specifications. The world doesn't need another way to..." The recording cut off abruptly. Brain's face had gone ashen. "Where did you get that file?" "From my wife's personal archives, the ones that were supposedly destroyed along with the rest of the project." Eli's smile was cold as winter. "Funny thing about Maya, she always kept backups." Scarlet's command center had become an impromptu courtroom, with Agent Brain looking increasingly like a defendant whose alibi was crumbling in real time. The man who had entered with such confidence now stood rigid, his tablet clutched against his chest like a shield. "Agent Brain," Scarlet said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of making life-and-death decisions, "I'm going to need you to surrender that tablet for immediate analysis." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Colonel. The contents are classified beyond your clearance level." "Then I'll invoke emergency protocols and elevate my clearance." She moved to her secure terminal. "Unless, of course, you'd prefer to explain to a military tribunal why you refuse to cooperate in a nuclear terrorism investigation." Brain's jaw worked silently for a moment. "You don't understand the complexity of the situation. Then enlighten me." Eli watched the exchange with growing certainty that they were finally approaching the truth. Maya's voice still echoed in his memory. Her concern about weaponization, her determination to protect her work from those who would abuse it. "Play the rest of the file," he said quietly. Brain's head snapped toward him. "What?" "Maya's recording. There's more, isn't there?" "You've heard the complete version." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Eli scrolled through his phone, finding another audio file. Maya was thorough. She documented everything, including her suspicions about Project Harp Seal's real purpose. He pressed play. Maya's voice filled the room again, but this time it carried an edge of fear. "Met with Agent Brain today. He's pushing for field deployment of the acoustic protocols. But something feels wrong. He keeps asking about fail-safes and remote activation capabilities. Why would a communication system need remote detonation triggers? I've started encoding safeguards into the base harmonics, just in case. If someone tries to weaponize this technology, they'll need my voice patterns to unlock the deeper encryption layers." The recording cut off again, but the implications hung in the air like smoke. "She knew," Scarlet said quietly. "She knew someone was planning to weaponize her work." "She was paranoid," Brain interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. Dr. Chavez Mercer was brilliant, but she had a tendency toward conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. Eli's voice was gaining strength, fueled by 3 years of suppressed anger. "You killed her, didn't you?" "Not directly, but you sent her into the field knowing the equipment would fail." "That's a serious accusation, Dr. Mercer." "It's the truth. Maya wasn't trained for field work, but suddenly she was, essential, for a routine equipment test. Except the test was designed to fail. You needed her dead so you could steal her work without interference." Brain was sweating now, his professional composure cracking like ice under pressure. "You have no proof." "Don't I?" Eli scrolled to another file. Maya was smart enough to leave a trail, audio breadcrumbs hidden in her personal files. Files that you thought were destroyed with the rest of the project. This recording was different, quieter, more intimate. Maya speaking directly to Eli, as if she knew he would one day need to hear these words. "Love, if you're listening to this, it means something has happened to me. I've hidden safeguards throughout the Harp Seal framework. Harmonic locks that can only be opened with specific emotional resonance patterns. If someone tries to weaponize our work, they'll need more than technical expertise. They'll need to understand the love that created it. The acoustic signature we developed together, the frequency of our partnership. That's the key to everything. Look for the pattern we called the Maya scale. Remember our anniversary waltz? 3/4 time, A major 7th resolution? That's not just music, Eli. That's the unlock sequence for..." The recording dissolved into static, but the message was clear. Scarlet stared at Brain with undisguised contempt. "You've been trying to crack Maya's safeguards for 3 years. That's why you planted the bomb here, not to kill anyone, but to force Eli to demonstrate the unlock sequence." "You're all insane," Brain said, but his voice was hollow. "This is elaborate fantasy." "Then prove it." Eli held up his phone. "Let me play the complete archive. All of Maya's files, including her documentation of your meetings and her suspicions about the true purpose of Harp Seal." "You can't have complete files. They were destroyed." "Were they?" Eli smiled grimly. "Maya was a belt and suspenders kind of person. She kept backups of her backups. And she was very specific about where to hide them." He gestured toward the now silent bomb. "Inside the acoustic framework itself. Every time you tried to reverse engineer her work, you were essentially downloading her diary." 3 years of investigation, and you never realized the evidence of your crimes was embedded in the very weapon you were trying to build. Brain's tablet slipped from nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor. The screen showed a real-time audio analysis, dozens of files extracting themselves from the bomb's harmonic structure like digital ghosts materializing from electronic static. "How is that possible?" Delaney whispered. "Maya embedded them in the frequency modulation," Eli explained. "Every pulse, every harmonic shift, it was all carrying data. Her voice, yes, but also documents, recordings, evidence. She turned the weapon into a witness." The room watched in fascination as Brain's tablet continued extracting files. 3 years of hidden evidence spilling out like water from a broken dam. "She knew you'd eventually force someone to activate the system," Eli continued. "She just didn't know it would be me, but she prepared for that possibility too." One final file appeared on the screen, a video recording. Maya's face filled the display, her expression serious but calm. "Agent Brain," her voice said, speaking directly to the man who had orchestrated her death, "if you're watching this, it means you finally succeeded in weaponizing our work. Congratulations. You've turned a language of love into an instrument of death, but you've also activated every piece of evidence I've spent the last 3 years collecting about your activities." Brain lunged for the tablet, but Scarlet was faster. Her hand closed around his wrist with crushing force. "I don't think so," she said quietly. On the screen, Maya's recorded image smiled sadly. "Eli, my love, I hope you never have to see this, but if you do, know that every frequency, every harmonic pattern in our work was designed to sing one simple truth. Love is stronger than fear. Even death can't silence that song." The recording ended, leaving the room in profound silence. Brain looked around desperately, seeing only faces filled with disgust and determination. "You don't understand the applications, the strategic advantages." "We understand perfectly," Scarlet said. "You murdered a brilliant woman to steal her work, then tried to frame her husband for terrorism when your theft didn't go according to plan." She keyed her radio. "Security to Command Center. I need Agent Brain and his associates detained pending a full investigation." As security personnel filled the room, Eli clutched his phone, Maya's voice still echoing in his memory. For 3 years, he'd thought of her as gone, a beautiful memory slowly fading into the past, but she had never left. She'd been waiting, patient and protective, ready to defend both her work and the man she loved from beyond the grave. Brain was led away in restraints, still protesting his innocence, but his voice was lost in the noise of justice finally, inevitably asserting itself. The bomb was disarmed. The conspiracy was exposed. But for Eli, the most important discovery was simpler and more profound. Maya's love had never ended. It had just changed frequency, becoming something that could survive death itself. 2 hours later, Eli found himself in the passenger seat of Scarlet's military jeep, racing across the Nevada desert toward coordinates that had been hidden in Maya's final transmission. The landscape blurred past, endless sand punctuated by scrub brush and the occasional cactus standing like a sentinel against the brutal sun. "Are you sure about this?" Scarlet asked for the 3rd time, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. "Brain could have associates out there. This could be an ambush." "It's not an ambush," Eli said, his eyes fixed on the GPS coordinates Maya had embedded in her acoustic framework. "It's an invitation." The coordinates led to an abandoned DoD testing facility, North Range Station, according to the rusted sign that hung askew from a chain-link fence. The buildings looked like they'd been empty for decades, their windows dark and their walls scoured by wind and sand. But as they approached the main complex, Eli could hear it. The same harmonic pulse they'd confronted back at Redstone Base, but different. Stronger, more compel. "Jesus," Scarlet breathed. "There's another one." The device sat in the center of what had once been a communications array, surrounded by equipment that looked far more sophisticated than anything Brain could have assembled alone. This wasn't a simple bomb, it was a complete acoustic warfare platform, capable of broadcasting frequencies across hundreds of miles. And it was singing Maya's song. "Eli." The voice came from behind them, calm and familiar. They turned to find Agent Brain standing 20 feet away, no longer in government-issued suit, but wearing desert camouflage. His restraints were gone, and he held what looked like a modified acoustic transmitter. "How did you?" Scarlet started, her hand moving toward her sidearm. "Escape? I didn't. This was always the plan." Brain's smile was different now, less bureaucratic arrogance, more genuine satisfaction. "Did you really think one man could orchestrate something this complex?" "Project Harp Seal was never shut down, Colonel. It just went private." Around the perimeter of the facility, figures emerged from concealment, a dozen operatives in desert gear, all carrying similar acoustic devices. Not weapons in the traditional sense, but something potentially far more dangerous. "You see, Dr. Mercer," Brain continued, "your wife was brilliant, but she was also naive. She thought acoustic manipulation could only be used for communication and defense. But we've discovered applications she never imagined." He gestured toward the central device. Mass psychological influence, crowd control through subsonic manipulation. The ability to incapacitate entire populations without firing a single shot. Maya's work wasn't just about building better communication systems. It was about redefining warfare itself. Eli stepped protectively in front of Scarlet. Maya would never have wanted her research used like this. "Maya's dead," Brain said bluntly. "What she wanted is irrelevant. What matters is what her work can accomplish in the right hands." "Your hands, you mean?" "Hands that understand the strategic implications. Hands that won't be constrained by outdated concepts like ethics and morality." Brain raised his transmitter. "But first we need to solve a problem. Your wife's safeguards are still preventing us from accessing the full potential of her framework. We need the complete unlock sequence." The device in the center of the array pulsed more urgently, its harmonics growing complex and demanding. Eli could hear Maya's voice woven through the frequencies, but distorted now. Not the loving guidance he'd experienced before, but something desperate and afraid. "She's trapped in there," he realized. "You've imprisoned pieces of Maya's consciousness in your acoustic matrix." "Consciousness is a strong word," Brain said dismissively. "Let's call it digital resonance patterns, fragments of her personality embedded in the harmonic structure. Useful for authentication purposes." Rage flowed through Eli like molten metal. "You didn't just steal her work, you enslaved her memory." "I preserved it. Without my intervention, Maya Chavez Mercer would be nothing but a name on a memorial wall. This way she contributes to something greater than herself." Scarlet's voice was ice cold. "You're insane." "I'm a visionary. And Dr. Mercer is going to help me realize that vision by providing the final harmonic sequence." Brain's expression hardened. "Voluntarily or otherwise?" The operatives around the perimeter raised their devices in unison, the air filled with a low, subsonic hum that seemed to vibrate in Eli's bones. Not painful, but profoundly unsettling, like being pressed by invisible hands. "Acoustic coercion," Brain explained conversationally. "We can increase the pressure gradually until your cognitive functions begin to break down. Most subjects comply within minutes rather than risk permanent neural damage." But Eli wasn't listening to Brain anymore. He was listening to Maya. Her voice was there, buried beneath the electronic static and the subsonic manipulation. Not the corrupted fragments Brain had imprisoned, but the real Maya, the woman who had embedded her love so deeply into the acoustic framework that no amount of technological perversion could completely silence it. "The pattern," her voice whispered in harmonics only he could hear. "Remember the pattern we created together, not the one they stole, but the one we built from love." Eli closed his eyes and began to hum. Not Maya's stolen recordings or the academic frameworks of Project Harp Seal, but something simpler and more powerful. The lullaby they had sung together on quiet evenings, the melody they had hummed while cooking dinner, the spontaneous harmonies that had emerged from a life shared in love. The effect was immediate and startling. Brain's acoustic devices began to malfunction, their frequencies warping and distorting as they encountered something they weren't designed to process. Genuine human emotion, encoded in sound. "What are you doing?" Brain demanded, but his voice was already being drowned out by the growing cascade of harmonic interference. Eli opened his eyes and smiled. "I'm setting her free." The central device erupted in a shower of sparks as Maya's true voice finally broke through the electronic prison Brain had built around her consciousness. The sound that emerged wasn't the distorted fragments of stolen recordings, but something pure and alive and impossibly beautiful. The acoustic signature of love itself, finally released from its technological chains. Around the perimeter, Brain's operatives stumbled as their weapons turned against them, the frequencies they'd tried to use for coercion now carrying messages of hope and healing instead of fear and submission. And in the center of the chaos, Eli heard Maya's voice one last time, not trapped in machines or twisted by technology, but free and clear and filled with all the love the death had tried and failed to silence. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered in harmonics that only his heart could hear. "Thank you for setting me free." The acoustic storm faded, leaving only the sound of wind across the desert and the distant rumble of approaching military vehicles, Scarlet's backup, finally arriving to clean up the mess that 3 years of lies and manipulation had created. Brain lay unconscious near his shattered transmitter, his grand vision of acoustic warfare reduced to smoking metal and broken dreams. But Eli barely noticed. He was listening to the silence, not the empty quiet of loss, but the peaceful silence of a song completed, a love story that had finally found its proper ending. Maya was free, and for the first time since her death, so was he. 3 weeks later, Eli stood in the kitchen of his small apartment, watching coffee drip into a pot that had seen better days. The morning light filtered through windows that needed cleaning, casting familiar shadows across linoleum floors that bore the scars of 3 years of single parenthood. Everything looked the same. Everything felt different. The official debriefing had taken 2 weeks. Congressional committees, military tribunals, intelligence reviews, an endless parade of officials trying to understand how Project Harp Seal had been perverted into a weapon of psychological warfare. Brain's network had been extensive, reaching into corners of the defense establishment that no one had suspected. The cleanup would take months, maybe years. But for Eli, the important work was already done. He poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs, one that read, "World's Okayest Dad," a Father's Day gift from Andy, and another bearing the faded logo of a long-defunct tech company. Steam rose from both cups, carrying the promise of caffeine and the simple pleasure of a quiet morning. "Dad?" Andy's voice came from the living room, accompanied by the soft percussion of sign language against fabric, as he communicated with someone Eli couldn't see. "Colonel Ray is here." Eli smiled. Scarlet had been coming by every few days, ostensibly to check on his well-being as part of the official aftermath protocols. But the visits had gradually shifted from professional obligation to something that felt suspiciously like friendship. Or maybe more than friendship. He carried the coffee into the living room, where Andy sat cross-legged on the carpet, his hands moving in animated conversation with Scarlet, who had positioned herself on the couch with the studied casualness of someone still learning how to be comfortable in civilian spaces. "Morning," Eli said, offering her the company logo mug. "Hope you don't mind civilian-grade coffee." "After 3 weeks of base commissary swill, this is probably an upgrade." She accepted the mug gratefully, inhaling the steam. "Thank you." Andy looked up from his conversation, his hands moving in rapid signs. Eli translated automatically, a skill he'd developed over years of being the bridge between his hearing-impaired son and a world that didn't always know how to listen. "He says you look tired," Eli told Scarlet, "but in a good way, like you've been sleeping better." Scarlet raised an eyebrow. "Your son is very perceptive." "He gets that from his mother." The words came easily now, without the sharp edge of grief that had characterized any mention of Maya for the past 3 years. She always said Andy heard things other people missed. Andy's hands moved again, and this time his expression was serious. "What did he say?" Scarlet asked. Eli hesitated. "He wants to know if you're going to stay." The question hung in the air between them, carrying weight that had nothing to do with morning coffee and everything to do with the careful reconstruction of a life that had been shattered and was slowly learning how to be whole again. "I don't know," Scarlet said honestly. "My assignment at Redstone is complete. There are other bases, other commands. The military doesn't usually let you stay in one place very long." Andy signed again, more urgently this time. Eli laughed. "He says that's a stupid rule, and that you should tell the military to make an exception." "Just like that?" "Just like that. Andy's not big on bureaucracy." Scarlet set down her coffee and looked directly at Andy, her hands moving in careful, deliberate signs. Her syntax was clumsy. She was still learning, but the message was clear: I want to stay. But staying is complicated. Andy's response was swift and definitive. Complicated is just another word for scared. Eli nearly choked on his coffee. Where did he learn that? Andy pointed at his father, grinning. Sounds familiar, Scarlet observed. Someone once told me that uncertainty was just another word for faith. Maya always was wise. Eli sat down in the worn armchair that had been his refuge through countless difficult nights. She also said that the best solutions usually come from listening to what your heart is telling you, not what your head thinks it should want. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, three people learning how to navigate the space between what had been and what might be. There's something you should know, Scarlet said eventually. The Pentagon offered me a promotion. Full colonel, my pick of assignments anywhere in the world. Eli felt something cold settle in his stomach. Congratulations. I turned it down. You what? Requested reassignment to Redstone Base as permanent installation commander. Apparently, successfully preventing nuclear terrorism gives you some leverage with the brass. She smiled. Who knew? Andy erupted in silent applause, his face bright with joy. Eli found himself grinning despite the emotional whiplash. So you're staying, he said. I'm staying, assuming, of course, that a certain janitor doesn't mind having his commanding officer hanging around. Former janitor, Eli corrected. Apparently, saving the base from nuclear annihilation comes with a promotion, too. They offered me a position as civilian acoustic systems consultant. Better pay, regular hours, and I get to keep the mop as a souvenir. And? I said yes, figured it was time to stop hiding from what I'm good at. Andy signed something elaborate and emphatic. Both adults looked at him expectantly. He says this calls for a celebration, Eli translated, and that we should play music. What kind of music? Scarlet asked. Andy disappeared into his bedroom and returned with a violin case. Battered and worn, but carefully maintained. Maya's violin, the one she'd played during the quiet evenings when work stress gave way to the simple pleasure of making beauty together. For 3 years it had sat silent. Eli couldn't bear to hear it without her fingers on the strings, her presence filling the spaces between notes. But now, watching Andy carefully lift the instrument from its case, he realized that silence wasn't the same as honor. Maya hadn't created music to be preserved in museums. She'd created it to be lived, shared, continued. Would you like me to play something? Andy signed to his father. Eli nodded, his throat suddenly tight with emotions that were no longer painful but weren't exactly comfortable either. Andy positioned the violin with the careful precision Maya had taught him during the brief years when she'd been alive to give lessons. His fingers found the strings, and he began to play, not perfectly, not with Maya's technical mastery, but with the pure intention of someone making music for the joy of it. The melody was simple, beautiful, and achingly familiar. The lullaby Eli and Maya had hummed together, transformed now into something new but recognizably connected to its origins. As Andy played, Eli found himself humming along, not with grief but with gratitude. Scarlet joined in softly, her voice blending with theirs in harmonies that hadn't been planned but felt inevitable. And in that moment, sitting in a small apartment with mismatched furniture and coffee that was probably too strong, Eli understood something Maya had tried to tell him for 3 years. Love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes frequency, becoming something that can be shared with new voices, new hearts, new possibilities for harmony. The bomb was silent. Brain was in prison. The conspiracy was exposed and dismantled. But this music they were making together in the morning light, this was the real victory. Not the dramatic salvation of lives and prevention of disaster, but the quiet miracle of building something beautiful from the pieces of what had been broken. Andy finished the song and looked up at his father expectantly. Beautiful, Eli said, and meant it. Maya would have loved it. Andy signed something quick and mischievous. What did he say? Scarlet asked. Eli laughed. He said Maya did love it. She's been listening the whole time. And maybe she had been. Maybe love really was stronger than death, encoded not in acoustic frequencies or harmonic patterns, but in the simple decision to keep making music together, even when, especially when, The future was uncertain, and the only thing you could trust was the rhythm of hearts that had learned to beat in time with each other. Outside, the world continued its complicated dance of politics and power, conspiracy and revelation. But inside, in the space they'd carved out for themselves, there was only this: the music they made together and the silence that followed. Not empty, but full of possibility. It was, Eli thought, the most beautiful frequency he'd ever heard. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.